The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, has decided to keep things unchanged and not reduce production. The decision at a key meeting in Vienna comes despite a huge drop in the price of oil since June because of a weak demand from Europe and China. The 12-country cartel accounts for 1/3 of the world's oil output. Member states, though, were divided on the move. Venezuela and Iran urged lower production, while Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states wanted no change. Nathan King joins us live now with more. Nathan.
Yeah, you'd think with oil prices plummeting and weak demand, you'd be kind of forgiven for thinking that OPEC would want to cut supply and push prices upwards. But the oil market is now a lot more complicated than the past decades when OPEC could strike fear into the world's oil markets. Oil prices sank below $72 a barrel Thursday, and OPEC members are hurting. This is where OPEC countries need the price of oil to be in order to balance their budgets. As you can see, even the largest oil exporter in OPEC, Saudi Arabia, needs it to be over $100 a barrel. Iran needs it to be around $130, Libya $184. But the oil market has changed over the last few years. For a start, OPEC isn't the only game in town anymore. US shale oil production has meant the US is producing more oil than it has in 30 years. So oil producers in the Middle East are now facing tougher competition for market share from Western sources of oil. They know that lower prices will hurt US production more than theirs. So essentially, what we have here is a battle for market share. But OPEC is by no means united over this decision. Less efficient exporters like Venezuela wanted to cut 2 million barrels a day from the current 30 million barrels of production. But they were overruled, and OPEC Secretary General has called for calm.
For the last 4 years and a half, we have a very decent price. So now price decline. That does not mean that we should really, rush and do something. We have to wait and see how the market will settle. As I said many times to you, that we don't want to panic.
This is all good news for car drivers. On Thursday, the price at the pump here in the US is averaging around $2.84 a gallon. That is a fall of nearly $1 since May. However, while OPEC may not have the ability to jack up prices at the pump as they did during the oil crises of the 1970s, the US now has to worry about prices falling too. If they fall too far and for too long, its booming oil industry could face a bust. It is now truly a global oil market, both in terms of supply and demand. Gotta love those old pictures. It's worth emphasizing, though, that the other big gainers right now, apart from consumers, the big oil importers, we're talking about China, of course, which is already taking advantage of low prices to buy up supply for their strategic oil reserves. Europe, too, will benefit. The likely losers, of course, outside of OPEC and inside, Nigeria, Angola, Venezuela and Russia, of course, all heavily dependent on oil exports.
Speaking of Russia, so how does that play into this?
Yeah,
Moscow?
Russia is a huge deal here. Now, Russia isn't part of OPEC, but they have been talking about prices, and there was no secret that they kind of wanted a cut and may have cut themselves. But there's a bit of bravado in the Russian negotiating position. The oil minister said, look, we can cope with oil at $60 a barrel. Most experts say, actually, Russia needs oil at over $100 a barrel. The big question geostrategically is when Russia starts losing money, how does that change its foreign policy? How does it stand off with the West in Ukraine, for example? So there's a lot to watch there. The big question, though, is, how's it going to affect the economies of like Russia, Iran, Venezuela, antagonistic powers to the United States as well. So there's a lot of talk that there's a strategic interest in this. Remember, Saudi Arabia is a big ally of the US as well.
Oil just plays such a big role, doesn't it?
Coming from the greater Middle East, you know that.
That's true. Thank you, Nathan.